So welcome everybody to the Monday, October 16th, 2023 meeting of the Burlingame City Council. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I apologize for starting just a couple of minutes late, but we were in closed session. Anyway, call the meeting to order at 7:02 or something. And as always, we will start with our pledge. And I wanted to ask a really important person to the entire region who may not have said the pledge since elementary school, who I know will do a great job, but Len Materman, who is protecting us and our property, our homes against sea level rise. Please join us in pledge. Lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. If we could have a roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Here.
Councilmember Beach.
Here.
Vice Mayor Coulson.
Here.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Here. And that then takes us to remote participation. No?
There's no request for remote participation tonight.
Okay, I never can understand that. Okay, great. So we did have a closed session. Mr. City Attorney, was there any reportable action out of our closed session?
No reportable action tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that takes us to upcoming events. And there are a number of them. It's an exciting period as we begin to head into the holiday period. I'll start with our library. So on November 8th at 6 p.m. in the Lane Room, the Community Poetry Open Mic Series, which sounds great. Join the library for an evening of poetry at the library's Community Poetry Open Mic Series with our featured reader, Mia Ayumi Malhotra. Come share a poem or just sit back and listen. The open mic will be followed by a reading and book signing by Mia with light refreshments. And so really a great chance to share in the spoken and written word with your community members. And then on the very next night, November 9th, Thursday at our tech lab at 5:30 p.m., there's something that is gently called Let's Try AI. To which I'm sure there are a number of people who say, let's not. But join our library tech staff as they explore two AI chatbots, ChatGPT and Bing Chat. You can find out what it's all about. It's kind of amazing, and they will walk you through it 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. in the tech lab. On our Park and Rec side, it's a number of exciting things coming up, starting with the Muddy Mile this Saturday. You can still sign up to run the Muddy Mile. Probably you can still sign up to be a volunteer. It is helpful. And I know Park and Rec is always looking for people to help out on the different jumps and whatnot, the obstacles that the runners have to go through. And it's a really good time, frankly, watching parents and their kids run the Muddy Mile and stuff. So that's this Saturday. The Nightmare Before Christmas Sing-Along is on October 27th at 7 p.m. at the Burlingame Community Center. That's free. You can sign up for a Halloween home decorating contest by Sunday, October 22nd. And judging will take place the week before Halloween. So if you are one of those homes that, your entire front lawn is taken up by blow-up dolls and spiders and whatnot, then go ahead and sign up and see if you have the most decorated house. Kids Night Out is on Friday, November 3rd, 6 to 9 p.m. Sign up at Park and Rec. The Fall Fest Kids Zone on Howard Avenue is happening on Sunday, October 29th as we get closer to Halloween. And then the Senior Halloween Dance, which is sponsored by Sapore, is on Thursday, October 26th from 4:30 to 6:30. Thank you, Sapore, for that support. Costumes are encouraged, and again, Park and Rec is where you sign up. And then in a slightly different vein, but very important to all of us who treasure our urban tree canopy, city staff are planting over 200 trees to help replace, supplement, and enhance our urban forest. And so our Park and Rec folks say, please help these young trees by making sure they get watered weekly when it's dry And if you want additional trees in the city right of way, which means the median in front of your home, if you are a single family home or in front of your multifamily home, please contact the Parks Division, and we would love to plant a new tree for you and for all of us. So that's the list of events that I have. Colleagues, anything else to add? I see none. Then I will move on. And that takes us to presentations. And the reason that Mr. Maderman and his colleagues are here tonight is a presentation from One Shoreline. So I invite you to join us at the podium and let us know how things are going.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and hi, council members. So I will, I have several slides and we'll go through that and then happy to answer questions. And I'll ask the clerk to advance the slides for me. So my name is Len Maderman and I run the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District. And with me is a project manager at the district, McKenna Wong. And we work closely with city staff, Syed from Public Works and Kevin Gardner from Community Development on both the project and the planning side of our interest in building resilience for the shoreline of Burlingame. Okay, next slide. So just to refresh the memory of folks who might not have kind of been attuned to the development of One Shoreline, there were been many studies over about the past decade looking at the climate vulnerability of different cities and counties throughout California. And those studies include what's on the screen right here, which is a vulnerability study by San Mateo County that was completed in 2018 and work by Caltrans, Stanford University. I'm going down the left side, and then a grand jury report that kind of assembled that, as well as a study of the Pacific Coast that identified the San Mateo County coastline as second to only lost coast in terms of erosion in California. And then finally, the last study is a study completed this past summer by BCDC and ABAG MTC. And all of those pointed to, in one way or another, the unique vulnerability of San Mateo County to sea level rise. Of course, we have vulnerability to other climate-related issues like the atmospheric rivers we've been seeing, drought, wildfire, and we share that with many other counties in California. But in terms of sea level rise, we exceed the other counties. Please advance the slide. So here are some pictures from the coast side, two on the left of the upper right of the slide, Highway 1 and just a little bit south of there. And that relates to the erosion issue that I was talking about earlier. And the slide in the upper right is interesting. It's in San Bruno, and it's about a mile upstream of San Bruno Creek. And so what that tells us is that the vulnerability to rising tides and sea level rise is not just on the coastline, it's also well inland. And that's water on a sunny day that comes up through the street. So I wanted to point that out. Please advance the slide. San Mateo County had a longstanding flood control district. It was developed by state legislation in the 1960s, but it only covered about 10% of the county land, and it was not set up really to deal with the substantial climate risk that we face in this county. If you advance the slide. And so it's a transformative issue. Our cities were not well positioned to address it individually, as well as the county wasn't positioned because in part on the Bay side, the county doesn't have much jurisdiction. Advance the slide, please. And so state legislation created One Shoreline effective January 1 of 2020 to deal with the water-related impacts of climate change. That includes the flooding, the sea level rise, coastal erosion, stormwater, water supply, and as well as support our recreational environmental interests. Okay. So our current priorities at One Shoreline, you can advance the slide, starts with planning. And as I mentioned, we been working with City of Burlingame staff and staff at other cities so that the general plans, specific plans, zoning ordinances, and the reviews of development proposals are geared towards site-specific resilience. And that contributes to regional resilience. And so what that means to me is when a project goes in that's along water, whether it's a creek or the shoreline, that project should be sited in a way that allows us, all of us collectively, to build regional resilience, and that we don't regret how the site is developed in the future when we have to build that resilience. I'll just pause for 1 second. There.
Technical difficulties.
It's still up on the Zoom.
Yeah. I just have to quickly look.
You want to minimize that?
Left.
Just to fill in time for a second, Mr. Manerman, I will share with you a line that a friend shared with me that I thought was useful. And he said, maybe you can find a way to use this, but he said, you know, everybody is always talking about how this year or last year was the hottest year on record. He goes, I prefer to say it's the coolest year in the next 100 years. That sort of puts it in perspective a little bit.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say we're in the new normal. And
Right.
what's interesting is in terms of these atmospheric rivers, people have been talking about last January and March and New Year's Eve and all of that
No.
in the last 9 months or so. It wasn't just this winter. It was also the winter of 2021. There were basically 2021 was a drought year, except for 2 days. And that was in October and in late December. And that was all the rain that we got. And those 2 days far exceeded everything that we had the rest of the whole year, the other 363 days.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we don't, I like that quote.
Yeah.
And we also view that in the kind of water context as what we're going to see in the future too. And of course, there will be years where we don't see that. Our job is to make sure we're resilient to when we do, and not worry about the fact that it's not always going to be the case. But the pattern seems pretty set right now.
Right. Exactly.
I might as well, since we can facilitate moving the meeting forward a little bit, but I just want to really thank, and this would have been normally at the end, but I want to acknowledge McKenna and the amazing work she's been doing, the rest of your staff. As you guys all know, I'm your representative for the North County for One Shoreline. And it has really exceeded our expectations on, I think, what we've been able to achieve so far, and creating a more comprehensive plan for how to continue to fund this from now on, and your sort of prowess with the financial grants that you've been given and things, which has really sustained it. So that's why we haven't had to come back to the cities and ask for more money yet. There may come a day. But while we're waiting, maybe you could talk a little bit about how the agency's funding itself.
Sure.
And kind of what the outlook is for that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And in terms of financing, I think it's important to point out that the chair of our finance committee is Donna Colson.
Surprise.
Yeah. But she's a great steward of our resources and is incredibly competent in this area, and so we appreciate her service on that. So One Shoreline was created by state legislation, as I mentioned, but it wasn't funded by legislation. And so council members may recall, and members of the public perhaps, that all of the 20 cities contributed to the 3 years startup costs associated with One Shoreline operations. And that was matched by County of San Mateo itself. And so those 3 years started January 1, 2020. So that ended December 31, 2022, about 9-10 months ago. And through kind of cost savings, let's say, also additional resources put in by San Mateo County, and also a state directed appropriation that now Congressman Mullen secured while he was still in the state assembly, have all led us to extend that 3-year period for at least an additional 4 years. Now we are looking at long-term funding streams, as we must, and how we kind of get to a place where we're in a position to secure that long-term funding and just make sure we still have an on-ramp to get to that point. And so there are conversations about different strategies. Some of those strategies include coming back to the cities for another kind of extension, let's say, of that on-ramp. And as we explore the other strategies that are related or require going to the voters or changing state law or other kinds of things that usually take more than 1 year to implement. So that's kind of where we're at.
Few minutes.
And
Oh, it's great.
Technical difficulties are over for now,
Congratulations.
but, okay.
Councilmember Beach is back with us.
She never left.
He never left. It was just the vid. Okay, got it.
She's been very diligently waiting,
Back to you, Mr. Materman.
okay.
almost.
Oh,
We may have,
Oh,
Oh,
there we are.
no.
Okay,
There we go.
okay, better talk quick.
yeah.
we're on the wrong one now.
Everything's over.
Okay. Great. Give us one moment.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so planning is a key project of ours. And 3.5 months ago, we adopted what we call a planning policy guidance. And this was a document to give template language to cities for their general plans, specific plans, and zoning ordinances. Now, Burlingame, to its great credit, took the lead on that over 1.5 years ago when you adopted the new zoning ordinance and you included significant elements of what we provided as guidance to all the other cities. Since that time, and I would say in large part because you did that, the cities of South San Francisco and San Carlos and East Palo Alto and I think I'm forgetting some, but anyway, other cities have picked up the mantle and started to write into their either general plans or zoning ordinances, or in some cases, both elements of resilience. So that's great. And we appreciate the leadership that Burlingame provided to that. What we're looking at in those 3 pictures are examples of commercial development that is severely vulnerable to sea level rise. This is during a high tide in Redwood City, about 2 miles inland from the port of Redwood City. So again, that's not right on the shoreline.
Mhm.
And then we're looking in the middle picture at an example of housing also in Redwood City that is on the shoreline of the bay. And then a water treatment plant, electrical room that's in Half Moon Bay. And those are examples, of course, of public and private on the first 2, and then public infrastructure that we need to be thinking about. So as we do this planning policy guidance, we did that for private development in June. The board adopted it. By the end of next year, we plan to put out and adopt a planning policy guidance for public infrastructure as cities think about their storm drain systems and their roads and working with PG&E and others on utilities and just all of the capital public infrastructure that goes in there. That also has to be resilient. It's not just on the private developers to worry about that issue. So that's our next phase of that. Please advance the slide. So we also do projects. And the project that I'll talk about today is the Millbrae and Burlingame shoreline. But there are many projects along the Bayside. There are 53 miles of Bayside in our county and 12 cities that are impacted by the Bay. And so there are many different efforts out there indicated by the different colors and the words on the bottom left. What I wanted to say about this is some of those are led by one shoreline, like the Burlingame Millbrae project, and some of those are led by others. One of them is completing construction, and that's Foster City. Our job, there are different elements of a shoreline that are in different phases, whether it's no planning yet, or planning, or design, or in Foster City's case, construction. Our job is to make sense of all of that, because there are many efforts out there. And how do we do the best job we can to provide substantial protection in an aligned way among neighboring jurisdictions? And that's super challenging, because there are all these cities, and each of them, of course, has a council and policies and interests, and there's private development pressures. And there's projects at different phases. So that's our task. In terms of the Burlingame and Millbrae project, I think it is worth kind of just reflecting on the fact that a key part of this Bay program is to connect to and leverage the work that San Francisco Airport is doing. And I'll talk more about that, but there's a many miles of shoreline just at SFO, and that would be a significant gap if we didn't work closely with them. Okay, advance the slide, please. We also think about storms, and certainly the last 2 winters, as was mentioned, provided ample opportunity to witness the effect of atmospheric rivers. So we have a countywide early warning system that's on selected creeks throughout our county. We also do work to increase the capacity of our creeks through emergency work. In fact, just last Friday, we had work done in Belmont Slough to open up a pipe that trains both Highway 101 and a mobile home park in city of Belmont area. And then we also do work right now. We're working with permitting agencies on securing a 5-year permit to do annual maintenance along creeks, and we're working with Caltrans to, under our permit, have them do the ability to remove debris under their key assets, which in this case are Highway 101 and El Camino Real. Okay, please advance the slide. And finally, as mentioned during the time that we were getting the slides back, is sustainability of the effort. Is how do we have ongoing funding streams, both from private sector beneficiaries and others, and how do we have all sectors see resilience as their issue? So sometimes I feel like climate resilience is put into a box like the environment or capital projects or levees or something like that. But how do we broaden that view so that the housing advocates see resilience as a key issue for them, so that people that care about utilities don't just think about the traditional aspects of utility generation and costs, but see that the infrastructure of utilities needs to be resilient. And so one of my missions is to work with the different sectors as much as possible, but it also depends on you all that are, in public policy making roles, is to kind of apply resilience to a broader frame than maybe what had traditionally been it had been exposed to. Next slide, please. Okay, long-term resilience to future conditions requires 2 things essentially. One is leadership. And you all provided that in late 2021 when you passed the zoning ordinance. And also, as I said before, earlier, how public and private development fits into a regional kind of view. Next slide, next advanced slide, please. So our project with Millbrae and Burlingame really ties in our minds to the zoning ordinance that was passed. Advance the slide, please. So the project's coastal protection objective, and we'll talk about this slide and the next couple slides, is to keep the bay shoreline, the creeks and lagoons in the area from overtopping when the bay water level is 6 feet above FEMA's current base flood elevation. So base flood elevation essentially means the 100-year level of either a storm and what that causes, or a high tide, a storm surge, those kinds of things. So we take FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, base flood elevation, which is the accepted number around the country. And that's the reason that we tie ourselves to it, is that it's well known, and people argue about it all the time, but it's basically the number that everyone has to adhere to when thinking about flooding. And we add 6 feet to that. Can you advance the slide, please? So in terms of how it fits into the Burlingame ordinance, in 2022, January of 2022, it was effective, the new zoning ordinance as one of the first in the Bay Area. And it included development requirements related to the shoreline protection infrastructure, as well as buffer zones away from water, whether that's a shoreline or creek, the first floor elevation of buildings, and stormwater capture and drainage, and looking at groundwater issues. And so there were many issues in that zoning ordinance. And we think about how our project mostly applies to the buffer zone and the shoreline protection infrastructure, and how does our designs and plans tie into development projects that you see there and ones that will come into the future. Those 5 sites are active sites. Some of them have been approved, and some of them are in the stages of approval right now. Next, could you advance the slide? Okay, big picture around SFO. So decades, I like this slide. It really, the blue lines indicate the creeks. And what you can see is what happened decades ago when SFO was created. Basically, the creeks had to be rerouted around the airport. And that combined with limited creek capacity is why we see flooding in San Bruno and Millbrae, and some cases Burlingame and South San Francisco. If you could advance the slide. So in South San Francisco, this is an image at Colma Creek near the Costco. And you can advance the slide again. This is an image in San Bruno in the Bel Air neighborhood, which is very close to Highway 101. And you can advance the slide. It's Millbrae in the Landing Lane neighborhood, which has seen flooding many times in the last few years. And then in Burlingame, the issue, at least the issue that we're working on with the project is closer to the shoreline. And you see this image during a high tide. That's quite close to the elevation of that wall. So a lot of water related issues around the airport, and it's not a coincidence. And you can advance the slide. So San Francisco is planning their Bayside protection. They call it the Shoreline Protection Program. It's a very large project. They've been at it for many years, and they just completed the EIR on that project. And so they're beginning what's called instead of that's EIR is the CEQA document. They're beginning the NEPA document, National Environmental Policy Act document, which is a kind of a compendium or related to the EIR. So they're beginning that process and moving forward on design. Meanwhile, you can advance the slide. Our project connects on the north and south side. On the north side, it's on the South San Francisco shoreline, where One Shoreline owns and manages a tide gate at San Bruno Creek. And so that, combined with efforts by Samtrans and the city of South San Francisco and the Corps of Engineers, there's a lot of work going on there that needs coordination with the San Francisco Airports project. On the south side, we have this Millbrae and Burlingame project that I'll talk to about. With San Francisco Airport, we've already shared quite a bit of technical information, which has been helpful to us and to them. And we're looking at, depending on the kind of outcome of our EIR and design, sharing land rights with them. And next slide, please. Okay, the need for the project here in Millbrae and Burlingame. You can advance the slide. Protection, many areas, you'll recognize this image. Many areas along the shoreline have very little protection in terms of any kind of levee system or marsh area that can absorb some of the high water. Advance the slide, please. Also a need for the project in terms of public access and recreation. There are gaps in the Bay Trail, and there are areas which either are part of the Bay Trail or are gaps that are both unsightly and in some cases even hazardous to try to traverse. And so we aim to solve that issue. And then one more time on this slide. And then finally, in terms of habitat, we want habitat that works for today's ecosystems, but perhaps more importantly, habitat that works under future conditions. As you know, there are mud flats out there, and it's not going to take very much sea level rise for those mud flats to be permanently covered in water. And that's just a different habitat. But it's our belief that we should be able to manage that shoreline habitat and not just turn it over to seawater. So we've supported very recently, I think it was a week ago, a grant application by the Burlingame Parks and Rec Foundation to restore area of the mouth Mills Creek to create a new habitat. And we were meeting with your staff and with the Parks and Rec Foundation volunteers to make sure essentially that what they're proposing in our project are copacetic, and they are, which is great. So hopefully that will work out. Next slide, please. Project history. In 2019, 2020, the city of Burlingame, 2019, produced a report on the sea level rise vulnerability and potential adaptation strategies. In 2020, the city of Millbrae did the same thing. One shoreline was created in 2020. And so shortly after those reports came out, we started talking to city staff and about the opportunity to connect the vulnerability and more importantly, the resilience of the two adjoining cities. You can advance the slide, please. And so we started working with city staff on what that looked like. Okay. And then in 2022, One Shoreline committed $4 million that we received, a part of what we received from the state of California. We committed it to this project to jumpstart the project. It's our first major effort. We put out an RFP, request for proposals, in early 2022 for a consultant team to do design and CEQA work. That's the slide. And so what we've completed since the summer of 2022, essentially in the last 15 months, is new information on topography and bathymetry by accessing very high, very advanced LiDAR flyover. We completed environmental constraints analyses, coastal hazard reports, inland flooding hazard reports, phase 1 geotech borings, and alternative feasibility analysis. All of this feeds into what I'll mention later, which is we've put out a notice of preparation on an EIR just last week. And our presentation today is intended to be timed with the public comment period on that EIR notice of preparation to give the city, elected officials, and public interested members of the public opportunity to comment on that. Next slide, please. Okay, project objectives: protect areas along the shoreline that, as I mentioned before, and nearby creeks and lagoons against the coastal hazards up to our bay protection standard, which is that FEMA base flood elevation plus 6 feet. Also to enhance the shoreline experience, which right now is extremely variable, and make that shoreline experience, enhanced shoreline experience, sustainable for the future. And then again, the sustainable ecosystems that thrive under future conditions, because the current shoreline habitat cannot. Next slide. Okay, the project's coastal protection benefits: protect properties against higher bay water level from sea level rise, storm surge, and waves. Keeps that higher water level from the creeks, which helps to protect creekside properties. And all of these studies contribute to the city's source of data and knowledge, and that would inform things like the city's storm drain master plan and other interests of the cities. And I'm going to point your attention to this picture on the right, and when the city council clerk advances the slide, what you'll see is the blue areas, most of them disappear. And what we're doing is we're going from the current 100-year floodplain to the post-project 100-year floodplain. And that floodplain post-project is really caused by a lack of capacity in the storm drain system. And I think it's important just to point out that this project is not intended to address the kind of interior storm drain issues, which are significant. We're worried about water going over land, rather than what gets into the streets and then can't find its way out. Now, we will help the storm drain system because we're going to keep that higher water level from the bay from going up the creek channels. So that's going to be a benefit. But I just wanted to be clear to everybody that this is not going to solve all the flooding problems in this area. Because it's under capacity of the storm drain system.
Mr. Materman?
Yeah, sure.
Question as well.
Yeah.
It's just at the very top of this photograph. I mean, we have San Francisco Airport, I take it.
That's right.
That's essentially completely flooded.
That's right. If you go back to, so
Completely flooded.
Yep. Yep. And the only reason that part of the airport, it's an astute observation. The only reason part of the airport doesn't show creek flooding, the only reason the runways in the future don't show completely covered by water is that new LiDAR data that we have, the flyover that we did last year, shows a topography to the runway that if the airport did not do their project, the next time FEMA redoes their maps, part of the runways will be out of the FEMA flood zone. But of course, San Francisco has to do their project. They realize that they're planning on doing it. They spend a lot of money and time on it. So basically the airport needs their project and we need their project to go forward as well, or a project around the airport to go forward as well. So, but I think the take home message on this slide is that a lot of the floodplain will go away. This should help property owners pretty substantially, but not all of it will go away until the storm drains are also addressed.
What does the gold line represent in this image?
I'm sorry.
What is the gold line meant to represent in this image?
Okay, I'll talk about that on the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the proposed project features. And I think that line is now kind of purple. Is that the line you're referring to? Okay.
Yep.
So what we're seeing here is the proposed project in our notice of preparation that came out last week for our project. And that includes a proposed offshore barrier to create a lagoon on the shore side of that barrier. Okay. What we have found through these various studies is that only looking at levees and walls has a very high cost in terms of financial cost, money, also a very high cost in terms of land and habitat. Now, there are habitat costs no matter what you do to build this protection. And that goes back to one of my earliest points is that we have a transformative challenge and the usual way of doing business is not going to solve that problem. We have to think boldly. So this is a bold response, I believe, because it's not been done in the Bay Area. And only looking onshore at levees and walls will have a very high cost in terms of land, money, and habitat. And additionally, as I mentioned, sea level rise will put our current habitat underwater and completely kind of cover it with no ability to adaptively manage it. So what we're proposing is an offshore barrier, and it could be extended to Coyote Point. And we've talked with the city of San Mateo and with the leadership at the county Parks and Rec or Parks Department about this idea because it would provide protection for San Mateo and for the Coyote recreation for there. And it would connect into San Francisco Airport in the upper left. Artificial reefs or barriers are not uncommon. There are artificial reefs that are in the San Francisco Bay Area. These provide typically habitat and wave attenuation, and sometimes they provide recreation behind them, new ways of recreating because the reef is there. So what we're proposing to do is take that known quantity that is more and more frequently permitted around the country for those benefits and adding the benefit of being able to modulate the water level offshore. So we also want to do the habitat features on the barrier. You know, there are different barriers that have like oysters on them, and you may have seen over the years or whatever. So we would put habitat on it. It would provide different types of recreation, and we think enhanced recreation along the shoreline. And it would certainly attenuate waves. And to that list, we're going to add creating the opportunity to modulate the water level in the lagoon and therefore reduce the coastal hazard to the creeks and to the shoreline.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I see that. Mr. Manorman, thank you very much. I'm very, very bold. Councilwoman Beach had a question
Of course.
virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Great presentation. Just a clarification, excited to hear that there's some natural components to this proposed lagoon barrier. Is this considered a nature-based solution or does it just have some components of habitat on it? Thanks for a little bit better understanding of that.
Yeah, sure. So the barrier, the barriers is a structure. It's something that we would build. It would have natural components as part of it. I think a nature-based solution is just defined as as a solution, if you will, that has natural benefits. And this barrier would have that. At its core, would it be something that is composed entirely of, I don't know, plants or something? I don't know what kind of natural, no, it would be a structural barrier. Now we recognize that this is a new idea, that even though barrier reefs have been permitted for San Francisco Bay, the idea of creating a barrier that develops a lagoon has not. So we recognize the challenges in permitting, and we've started conversations with the permitting agencies on this at a high level. But we believe that the alternative of working solely on the shoreline and following these creeks up with flood walls, and this is a heavily urbanized creeks. So there's not an opportunity to, unless we start taking property, there's not an opportunity really to just widen these creeks substantially. That we think that the environmental impacts associated with an offshore barrier and some onshore work is preferable to the environmental impacts and the practicality of working in all these creeks. So there are 5 creeks, several miles, if you add it together, of work. So you'll notice this brown line along the shoreline. And what we wanted to do with this, because we recognize that it's possible the permitting agencies don't end up supporting this. I mean, that's certainly a possibility. That we wanted to, in our environmental impact report, also analyze the impacts of working onshore. And the list of things that we would do onshore potentially include trails, beaches, habitat, levees, walls, bridges, and tide gates and pump stations at the creeks. And so we will analyze that as well, so that if the conversations with the permitting agencies kind of dictate that, no, this offshore barrier is not going to happen here, then we have a fallback in the EIR to complete the analysis of something that we know can work. It's going to be more expensive. And we believe at the end of the day, and this is our job, is to demonstrate that it's more impactful to the environment to stay onshore. But if that's where we end up, then we want to be in a position so that this EIR can cover it. Okay. So now specifically to the EIR, here's a list, I won't go through them, of all the topics we propose to analyze in the EIR. These are common to environmental impact reports around the state. And we will analyze these topics and potentially others and propose mitigation measures to reduce or avoid impacts. Can advance the slide. And we're going to give some special attention to water quality issues in the lagoon. We know that will be important. I think we've all heard about or seen the algae blooms of the last couple of years in the bay, and there's a big concern about that. And we certainly don't want to add to that issue by creating a lagoon. And so water circulation is going to be really important. We want to study that. Of course, fish migration and birds. If you have a lagoon, adaptability to future conditions, and including the protection objectives, future adaptability in terms of protection and recreation and habitat to these future conditions of the lagoon. And then the regional context. How does this fit in with the rest of the shoreline of San Francisco Bay? Those are things that we'll be looking at in addition to the kind of traditional EIR questions. Can I advance the slide, please? We do have this notice of preparation that went out on October 10th. And we're now in a public scoping period. Here's a way to get the notice of preparation through our website, oneshoreline.org/projects/Millbrae-Burlingame. The public comment period goes through November 15. We have a public scoping meeting at the Burlingame Community Center on November 2nd at 7 p.m. And all members of the public are invited to that to hear about the project and make comments on the scope of the EIR. And then the emails, there's an email address, projects@oneshoreline.org, to ask questions or provide comments on the NOP up until November 15. That's the slide. So next steps on the project. We have the scoping period that will end again November 15. Advance the slide. And by the spring of 2024, we plan to have 30% conceptual designs. During this whole period between now and then, we'll be working with regulatory agencies and doing some public outreach in addition to, this meeting and the Millbrae City Council presentation next Tuesday, and our scoping meeting. Additionally, that we're putting together an outreach strategy. I want to work with the cities on that, and then developing the draft EIR. And you can advance the slide. By the fall of 2024, complete our LEDPA analysis. That stands for least environmentally damaging practicable alternative, which is a federal requirement through the Clean Water Act that we demonstrate that. And so we'll be completing that analysis both for the Army Corps of Engineers and for the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and then completing the draft EIR by next fall. Advance. And then it's really important to point out that after that, we basically, it's unfunded the rest of the way of the project. And we have applied for, with the city of Burlingame, for some FEMA money, and we got a small grant. This was applied for about 2 years ago now. And it's for $300,000, so that will help. We also put in an application last month for some funding or letter of intent. That does not look to be successful. So we are looking at different grant opportunities and working with the city staff on that. But at the end of the day, we want to take this draft EIR to a complete EIR and complete design, and that's going to take resources. So over the next year, we should be working on that together, along with our other partners, Millbrae, potentially San Mateo, City of San Mateo, potentially San Francisco Airport, and private interests that have an interest in protecting their assets. And then next slide, I think that's it. Yes, thank you very much. Happy to answer.
Thank you very much for that presentation, which I love big ideas, and there are big ideas. And colleagues, questions or comments for Mr. Maderman? And let me begin by thanking Vice Mayor Coulson for her service on One Shoreline. Thank you for that hard work. It's important for the entire region. Colleagues?
Thank you.
Go ahead, I can wrap up.
Well, I have to say that isn't what I expected. So I think it's the kind of big thinking that usually big problems need. And if you think about trying to fix an entire coastline, private parcel by private parcel, it's pretty daunting. And so I'm fascinated by this. I will say, which I would say to my colleagues, that I think it may be impossible, but I think it would be helpful for our city to try to determine if we can take a city position on this in time for the public comment. We may not be able to, because it's clearly going to be a complicated project. So I'm not sure if the city will be able to, get its act together, just to be candid. And then I would just say to you, as somebody who does like big ideas, inevitably, the critics will be the first and loudest out of the gate, because it's easy to criticize. And so I just urge you to stick with it and see where the investigation takes you, where the science takes you, where the common sense takes you. And usually the majority of people like common sense solutions. But this will be nasty at first, would be my prediction. And so thank you for being bold. Thank you for thinking big. Thank you for protecting the coastline, because it's our livelihood. 1/3 of our revenue, more or less, comes from businesses and enterprises that are over on the Bayside, not to mention our water treatment facility and so forth. So this isn't of a passing interest to the city of Burlingame. It's almost an existential threat. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Madam Vice Mayor.
I just thank you very much, Mr. Maderman, for your work and the staff's work, and also for our staff's work, because they've really put a lot of effort into this. And I appreciate Lisa supporting us along the way, because it takes resources away from other things we're working on. And you've been great. But I also just want to point out, Mr. Maderman has not just been recognized here for the work he's doing, but he has stepped up big time to help the city of Sausalito, working with them. And what's interesting is the sort of focus on One Shoreline of like mutual collaboration with not just, California, but the East Coast and overseas cities, and bringing all those minds together. I think that's like, for example, some of these barrier reefs are going to be produced in a blue industry in Sausalito. So they're making them and trying to figure that out. we're working with them. I really appreciate the sort of outside of San Mateo County perspective that you bring and the ability to sort of find out what other people are doing and bring it in and talk to them and then share ideas, because it facilitates, sort of everybody having a solution, not just us. And then we can take from what they're learning and bring it back here. So your ability to collaborate with others has just been very much appreciated, I think, by all of us.
Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Would anyone in the public like to comment on this presentation? And Madam City Clerk, is there anyone at home? Oh, no, we're not doing, sorry, I should have perhaps. We don't have any mail. I should have perhaps opened, you'll forgive me for just a brief parenthetical remark. I should have perhaps opened this session by saying that in light of some of the commentary around the county, really hateful stuff, we took the tough decision and we regret, we are saddened by it, but it's the right decision to not allow people to comment Zoom live. So we welcome public comment in written form. We are glad that we continue to keep the stream live for people to watch at home, but we are not going to subject either the council or the participants or the citizens to the hate speech that sadly darkened a number of other councils. So we're not taking live commentary at this point. I forgot that. But anyway, no written commentary. So I'll close then the public comment. Are there any other parting thoughts from Mr. Materman before we move on? Mr. Stevenson.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just thank you for the work you're doing. I mean, I think part of the challenge we have is just the scale of what we have to address, yet you still have to start somewhere. And so I look at this as not only the combination of big ideas that are maybe multiple jurisdictions that need to be involved and supportive, but it's also then informing how we need to address some of the local things that we can do just from a city perspective in terms of the shoreline. So just applaud that effort and keep going.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just reiterate that the city of Burlingame really provided us with a lot of leadership that was desperately needed by cities in San Mateo County and elsewhere to say it's okay to have a zoning ordinance that says we're focused on the future.
Yeah.
And not just in very small ways, but in big ways. And so, I really applaud this city, the staff, starting with the staff and leadership that was on our One Shorelines board to say, let's bring something forward. Let's put it out for the public review and then let's adopt it. And you deserve a lot of credit for that. So I really appreciate that.
It's kind of like the frog in the pot of water and the temperatures turning up very slowly. Certainly people are impacted, just have to look at the last atmospheric river or those that are on the shoreline. But the reality is a lot of it's out of sight and therefore not necessarily a priority. So how do we use these moments in the educational process to keep everybody's attention on this?
Yeah.
Thank
you
you.
very much. Okay, well, that was a thoroughly interesting and somewhat somber presentation, after which we now get to go to beautification, which should be uplifting. Not to say that that work isn't uplifting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members for the opportunity to present. So my name is Sean Chu, and I'm here to represent the Burlingame Beautification Commission. And before I proceed, I want to briefly acknowledge my co-commissioner, Hadia Khoury, who is also here in attendance. So the purpose of this presentation is to describe two awards that we're about to present. For those of you in attendance who may not be fully aware, the core function of the Burlingame Beautification Commission is to serve as a citizens advisory body to provide input to the city government on all matters relating to the city's trees, both public and on private property. And as a city, Burlingame considers itself to be a city of trees because the people of the city recognize the importance of trees, both for the environment as well as for human health. Trees cool our city and provide a host of other benefits that will become all the more important as our climate continues to heat up. The topic of the previous presentation. For this reason, one of the main goals of the commission is to promote landscaping that protects our urban canopy as well as fosters sustainability in our landscaping more generally. And towards this end, every year following a very comprehensive and selective process, we present 2 awards, one to a local business and one to a private residence that exemplify excellence in sustainable landscaping design. So the first award I'm going to be presenting today is the Business Landscape Award. And the recipient of the award this year is Mills Peninsula Medical Center.
Oh, yeah.
And in the next few slides, I'm going to, sorry, I didn't even pull up the slide. Madam Clerk, would you be able to pull up what we really need is just the photographs. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, then I'll just have to describe it verbally. Here to represent Mills Peninsula is Mr. Gabe Burstein. Would you please come up to be recognized? So what I would have shown in the slide deck is some photographs that show how Mills Peninsula demonstrably also cares a lot about many of the values that the commission as well as the city more generally cares about. And while individual commissioners probably have their own individual reasons for making the selection, I'll just briefly editorialize and say one of the things that I really like about Mills Peninsula is that the landscaping there has a lot of structure. So in a lot of corporate landscaping, there's a lot of use of hardscape or broad expanses of really low plants, but there's a lot of diversity in terms of stature and types of plants at Mills Peninsula. There are trees, shrubs, as well as, like grasses. So it's very, very diverse. And it also makes use of massing of similar plants in certain areas that creates a really striking visual effect. And all of the plants are very drought tolerant and appropriate for the region. For those of you who had the opportunity, I would encourage you to visit Mills Peninsula. It's kind of hard to miss as you're driving along El Camino. And I would like to present these stickers to Mills Peninsula that acknowledge your status as the winner of the 2023 award.
Hey, Sean, photo op.
You want to do both at first? Wait.
It probably would make more sense, but I think we're being called.
Yeah.
Just stand in front of the.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's residential. Ready?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have. So we actually have your slides if you want to just go. through
Oh, okay,
them
that would be
Quick,
It would be
I
great.
hope.
Briefly scroll through the four photos.
If I can-
Actually, Sean, would you hold on for 1 second?
Sure.
Can I
What?
look through Mills Peninsula? So do you want to describe it or you want to just flip through it?
Let's just go through it. I've already commented on it, but
Very pretty.
Beautiful.
now the second award is
Hey,
the red.
Hang on.
Okay.
I can't look it up fast enough. Can I just use this moment for a second to ask the new executive director of Mills Peninsula to come and join us at the podium because he's new to running the hospital. And it just gives us a chance to welcome you to our community. If you don't mind, Sean, just for a second. So just, first of all, congratulations on the award. It's well deserved. I have to say, I remember Sean, being on the planning commission when this project came through and looking at all of that landscaping just as a rendering. And it's so cool to see it in real life. But introduce yourself briefly since.
Happy to. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. Certainly excited and to celebrate with our team and the tremendous work they do on our landscaping day in and day out. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. So thank you for this opportunity. As was mentioned, I'm Darian Harris. I'm the new Chief Executive Officer at Mills Peninsula Medical Center. Joined the team about 10 or 11 weeks ago. Exceedingly excited to be here and certainly support the community. Live right down the street here in Burlingame. So thank you for everything that you do. Have a few kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, starting actually at Washington down the street. And so excited to be here. And we have an exciting path ahead at Mills Peninsula. And our focus is just going to be continuing to understand, listen to the needs of the community. And I think to the presentation we had before, build for the future. We're excited to build for what our needs are, not only today, but into the future. And certainly appreciate your partnership and your leadership for the community to make sure that we're positioned for success.
Well, Darian, thank you so much for stepping up. And Sean, I'm sorry for interrupting for just a second, but he's brand new and seeing you in the audience, I wanted to give you a chance to say hello. We look forward to having Mills Peninsula come back and give us an update on how the hospital's doing and.
I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you for the invitation. It's so amazing to see you all. Look forward to spending more time and certainly picking your brain about our opportunities to partner.
Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So as I mentioned previously, the second award goes to a private residence, which obviously is a very different kind of endeavor from a large commercial property. The recipient of this year's award for the Residential Sustainable Landscape Award is the owners at 5 Valdivia Court. I'm not sure whether there's anyone in attendance to receive the award. I don't believe so. So we will keep this award with us and attempt to keep on. We will continue to attempt to contact the owners of this property. Though the following 3 slides are photographs of this property.
Wow.
And as you can see, this is a very different style of landscaping from Mills Peninsula. Obviously, it's a different scale. It's also a much more formal and geometric design. But what I really appreciate about this property is as well the great diversity in structure, and there's some really great plant selection and color at this property. So if the owners were here, I would congratulate them, but I will do so vicariously, and we will keep this plaque, which goes to this year's award winner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, bravo. Absentia. Colleagues, any comments or quick?
Yeah.
Yes, Vice Mayor Coulson.
While we have you both here, I had a quick question, which was, we had discussed, I think, a couple of years ago, adding multifamily residential and adding maybe like balconies, like other topics, because not everybody lives in a single family home in this community, and we should want to make sure that we're inclusive and welcoming in our awards. So I just wanted to see if maybe one of our commissioners had any comment on that for future awards.
So this is the exact topic that has come up at some of the previous commission meetings, and this is something that we're going to discuss hopefully at one of the future meetings.
I would strongly encourage it because I think it's a way for us to engage another 55 to 60% of our community that doesn't live in single family homes. So thank you very much for considering that.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to be inclusive of everybody who lives in the city.
Mhm. And it could be apartments, could be their own sort of, or multifamily, if you will. And then also for people who live in apartments, a lot of people do their balconies beautifully. And maybe if you can't, walk around and see balconies, but you could ask for people to submit pictures of their balconies, their apartment balconies and what they've done with their tables and their plants and things. And then you could take a look, and that would be, a pool from which you could look, knowing that they would be welcome to having you into their home to take a look and take pictures. So those would just be my 2 suggestions.
Thank you for the suggestions.
Excellent. Any other comments for our beautification commission? Councilmember Beach, anything at your end? Okay, she's good. I do have to open it up for public comment. Would anyone like in the public like to comment on this part of the proceedings? And are there any comments from home? Just so no comments, but thank you so much for the hard work and and just as you said at the beginning, the urban canopy is a big part of the fabric of Burlingame. So thank you guys for protecting it, for enhancing it, and for recognizing our residents, commercial and private citizens who also care and make their places part of the fabric. So thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So that takes us into public comment. Now, this is the time for anybody to comment on issues that are not on the agenda. If you want to comment on an agenda item, please wait for that to come up. Open it up for public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to speak? I see none here at City Hall
Emails.
and no email. So we will move on from public comment, and that takes us to the consent calendar. We have 7 items on consent. Would colleagues like to pull any item off for discussion? Nope. See none. Would any member of the public like to call off one of these items? I see none. I'd welcome a motion.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Councilmember Stevenson. If we could have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. On to our public hearings, and the first one is to adopt a resolution establishing a hearing date of December 4th regarding our solid waste rates for the future. And we will start with a staff report from our amazing Director of Finance.
Okay, I'm gonna start introduce our consultant here. Good evening, Mayor and Council member. The city last solid waste rate increase was on April 1st, 2022. The city engaged R3 consulting group last fall to conduct a comprehensive rate study for the city. Tonight, we have Garth Schultz, the R3 president, to share the result of study and answer any question you may have. So with that, I will invite Garth on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. And Honorable Mayor, council members, staff and public. Again, Garth Schultz, principal with our R3 consulting group. Brief presentation for you tonight just to cover why we're here, what our findings were, and what the recommendation is for the council in terms of steps. Those are here. So we'll just move on to the next slide, please. So the action this evening is simply requesting that the council schedule and set a public hearing for December 4th to consider 5 years of forecasted solid waste rates. I'll go into what those are and why we're recommending 5 years worth of rate setting. Following this action, should the council set that public hearing date, there will also be a notice to ratepayers in the city regarding the proposed solid waste rates at Prop 218 45-day notification notice about the public hearing. Next slide, please. Okay, so just by way of background, I should state first off, I'm a representative of a consulting firm that works for you as the city, not for any of your solid waste operators. We're an independent third party that works exclusively for local governments on matters like these. So in terms of your conditions around your solid waste and recycling services, that utility, that public utility that you administer and manage here in the city, first off, you're a member of the South Bayside Waste Management Authority, and well-served, as I might add, one of the premier solid waste management administration organizations in the state. And I've worked with 150 to 200 of them up and down the state. So as a member of that Joint Powers Authority, you're provided with a whole host of oversight, administration, and regulatory services. So though you do hold your own agreement with your solid waste collection services provider, Recology, you do hold your own franchise agreement with Recology. Management, administration, and oversight of that is provided through the authority. Additionally, the authority provides management and administration planning, programming, advancement, and development of things involving post-collection. So you'll hear me mention post-collection and collection a couple times in this presentation. Collection is that activity whereby the trucks come by residents and businesses and pick up containers and empty the contents in the trucks. Once they deliver the material that's in the trucks to a facility, that's post-collection. And so that's activities like transferring the material to be able to go to a garbage landfill, or processing the material to recover the recyclable elements and market them on the international commodities marketplace, or compost those materials and turn them into valuable soil product. So all that post-collection processing and recycling, so on and so forth, is owned by the South Bayside Waste Management Authority and deposited through that Shorewave facility, which I imagine you've heard about at some point in the past. Your actions are you approve solid waste rates to cover the costs associated with the collection, post-collection programs run by SBWMA and your own city programs, as well as administer that agreement. You may adopt up to 5 years worth of solid waste rates in one action, and that's what is recommended. We can, as we get towards the end of the presentation, you may have questions around, well, what happens if it's not sufficient in 3 years? You can always renotice, but you can do 5 years worth of rate setting and notifications in one fell swoop. As Helen mentioned, your rates were last increased in March of 2022. That was a 5% increase. Those rates are still in effect today, so it has been over a year and a half since your rates were last adjusted. Currently, your rate revenues in this calendar year and next calendar year are not projected to cover the cost of providing service. So there's a shortfall. That shortfall carries forward to future rate years. The way your contract with Recology and your relationship with the SBWMA authority is organized, and this is true for all of the members of the authority, is you set an annual compensation to Recology and a projected compensation to SBWMA for the operations of the shoreline facility. And there's an over under. So if you collect more on rates that are needed to cover the cost of service, that's a surplus that goes forward to offset future years' rates. And the opposite is true. If there's a shortfall, it's something to be made up. True of most everywhere in the nation right now, costs of providing service are increasing. With respect to the Recology contract, they're increasing in accordance with market indexes posted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics or their own collective bargaining agreements with their drivers. So those, it's not true costs that are going up in terms of what your compensation is adjusted by, but it's these external indexes. Those indexes show increase in the cost of labor, increase in the cost of fuel, and other general inflation. Pretty much common with most other costs in the world right now. For post-collection services at the Shorewave facility, again, owned and managed by SBWMA, inflationary impacts are, of course, also taking place. But there's also a new operating agreement for a new service provider that will start being undertaken soon. That's driving up the costs of operation at the facility. And there are some truly unique market conditions that have been present in this solid waste space for a number of years. You probably remember hearing about the Chinese national sword, which changed the value of commodities in the recyclables marketplace. But there's also other pressures on things like composting facilities, regulatory pressures, demand, which are driving the costs of those operations up. So all in all, it's true, it's a fact that rates need to be adjusted in order to cover the increased cost of service. And through our work, both reviewing materials that have been put forward and reviewed by SBWMA and making some of our own projections for the out years beyond this coming calendar year 2024, we forecasted the various costs and revenues that would be necessary to keep this operation sustainable. So briefly now covering what we found, and I'll cover kind of 3 primary buckets of rate compensation or rate revenue generation need. So half of the costs in your system are for the collection activities, those activities conducted by Recology. And the way those change is all set per your franchise agreement. SBWMA staff and then the board ultimately review and approve those on an annual basis. That compensation was approved by the board back in September, along with you, Mr. Mayor. And those, on the whole, for the city of Burlingame, your compensation to Recology in this coming calendar year 2024 is increasing just under 7%. In the out years, we've forecasted a conservative 4% increase year over year. There are other variables that come into play, service level adjustments and the like. We didn't want to over forecast revenue need. We found this to be relatively conservative for the next few years. It's important to note that just because we set, say, a forecast of 4% increase for collection and a higher set of increases for post-collection, it all comes out in the wash. If one's over, one's under, that's fine. If they're both over the projections here, you might be coming back somewhat early for rate readjustment in, say, 3 or 4 years instead of 5. There goes the presentation. So the next category that was up there was cost for post-collection activities. That's 35% of overall rate revenues. These here again are set and reviewed annually by the SBWMA board. It includes the cost of all those post-collection, landfilling of garbage, processing of recyclables, composting of organics, but it also includes SBWMA's own programs supporting each of the cities with compliance and reporting to the state, planning around future investments, planning around future needs, and planning around future waste reduction. For 2024, those costs are projected to increase about 25%. That's due to the new operating agreement with the new service provider. The SBWMA board in September did approve use of rate stabilization reserves to bring forecasted costs down in terms of at least what's extended to its member agencies. But the fact remains that despite that action, which is good and helpful in terms of the overall need for the city, the costs are still increasing. And so we kept in our study the forecasted costs as is, accounted for the fact that the rate stabilization is being applied on a regional scale. There are also some unknowns still in terms of your post-collection facility universe, future capital investments that are known and anticipated, but still not certain in terms of their overall costs. And so for that reason, in addition to the 25% increase in what are essentially post-collection per ton tipping fees, we forecasted another 10% increase next year and 7% increases in the out years. And again, here, if those are a little high, those would be offset if the collections are a little bit low. Okay, going to a slide you can't see. There's one final component of what's in the rate, and that's cost for city management programs administration. It's 15% of overall rate revenues. Here again, set by your franchise agreement, but it covers things like costs of your post-closure maintenance for your landfill, street sweeping in city streets, steam cleaning of public solid waste receptacles and containers, the all-important compliance with state laws and unfunded mandates, management administration of your agreement itself, the use of the government property, the public right-of-way where the carts are set out for collection by Recology, and impacts to pavement, the underlying pavement conditions. And that set of costs that you have here is consistent and commensurate with what other cities in the state also include in their rate sets. Importantly, in our forecasts, in order to offset impacts to ratepayers in the near term, we've recommended use of some rate stabilization reserves in your solid waste funds that you maintain. The city maintains 2. They're pretty interlinked, very similar in terms of their approach, a solid waste fund itself, and then a landfill post-closure fund. The solid waste fund has been used by the city historically to fund any shortfalls in rate revenues to the cost of operations. So using this proactively for rate stabilization is both consistent with prior practice and getting you ahead of the curve. Fund balances in both of those funds are healthy, and even with the use of rate stabilization reserves, really just in the next 3 years, the need for the rate reserve stabilization would be offset toward the end of the 5-year window. Those fund balances would still remain healthy at the end of the 5 years. Okay, I will not show you the increasing curve. It's a very colorful chart showing you how things increase over time, but it's just to give you a sense of how the total system costs are projected to increase from this year through to 2028. And that is, I believe, both in the staff report and in our supplemental report to the council packet, as is a chart showing what happens to your solid waste fund when you use rate stabilization reserves to offset rate adjustments and increases. And it's just further evidence that that fund still remains healthy and solvent, even though we recommend using some of your existing fund balance to offset rate increases. these next couple of years. Okay, so what I think we'll do is I'm going to describe some of the proposed rates. I had a chart that would show those again here in your staff packet describing the monthly residential rates by year. One of the things that's important to know, and we are seeking council feedback on, back in 2012, you had a 20-gallon garbage rate for residential ratepayers. It was discontinued as a service offering at that time. Though those that were subscribed to it, there's still roughly 655 of them, were allowed to maintain that service at the prior service rate that now for 12-year-old service rate. So folks haven't been able to resubscribe to 20-gallon service since 2012. We did receive direction through this effort to reintroduce the 20-gallon service rate as a new option, a lower cost, lower waste generating option for customers. Our recommendation is to do that at 90% of the 32-gallon rate. And that's for the reason that there's a base level of cost of providing that collection service. And because the rate is on the garbage container itself, inclusive of the garbage and recycling and organics containers, it's a bundled service. Evidence in other cities indicates that having that rate set too low doesn't cover the cost of providing service. In our assessment, 90% of the 32-gallon rate does cover the cost of providing service. The question to the council with respect to the 20-gallon is, for those 655 solid waste subscribers on the old grandfathered rate, shall they remain at the old grandfathered rate or be adjusted to the new 20-gallon service rate offering that's being recommended? With respect to how rates might change for customers over the course of the coming 5 years as recommended, most residential customers in the city subscribe to the 32-gallon garbage service package. Those customers would see rate increases on a month, their monthly rate would increase by $3 a year or less than $3 a year throughout the forecast horizon. So just under $3 next year, slightly less than that the following, and kind of a descending level of adjustments in the out years. This is also in the packet. Covered the 32. We provided information around how the commercial rates would be set and what they would look like. But I think the kind of important capstone on my presentation is that in terms of your residential rates right now within San Mateo County, you're amongst the lowest. And after adjustments as recommended, your 2024 rates would still be amongst the lowest in comparison to other existing 2023 rates throughout the county. Importantly here, because you're a member of the SBWMA, virtually, the majority of other San Mateo County agencies are all facing the same pressures in terms of adjustment to compensation for recology and for post-collection activities. So yours are projected to go up. Virtually all these other agencies are projected to go up in similar ways over the same time horizon. For your commercial rates, you're a little bit more towards the middle of the pack, but still on the lower to middle end of the pack in your comparative commercial rates. So to conclude, in terms of next steps tonight, again, the request of the council is to establish your public hearing date for December 4th, provide direction regarding what to do about these grandfathered 20-gallon customers. And then following action tonight, staff will work to issue the 45-day notices to ratepayers. Ratepayers will have the opportunity with that to submit written protests of rate adjustment. And then you would conduct the protest hearing on December 4th, count any protests that come in. And if no majority protest of ratepayers exists, you'd have the ability to approve the new rates effective January 1, not just in 2024, but each in the subsequent 4 years thereafter. And then you wouldn't have to do this for another 5 years. Your next rate study would be conducted in 2028 for the years 2029 through 2020 or 2033. And again, as I mentioned, if you have the ability to kind of monitor your financial outcomes as you're proceeding forward, you do get good and accurate data through your authority on an annual basis. So if for some reason projections are not really panning out as projected here, you have the ability to reissue rate notices earlier if necessary. Although I think you'd be in good shape with the 5 years as presented. Happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you for having me this year.
Very much for that overview, and I'm going to hand it off to questions. I'm going to add just a couple of additional comments, if I may, as the Burlingame board member to SBWMA. So mostly by way of helping colleagues know that we work really hard to make sure that rates stay competitive and even low. So just as a couple of quick talking points, should anybody need them, we don't just rubber stamp Recology. So in this last cycle, we denied $830,000 of claims from Recology that they thought they were owed, and we said we didn't part of the contract. Our approach to both Recology and the people who manage the transfer station is to have fixed contracts with very clear variable costs that they're allowed to adjust. So if something falls out of that realm, they're not allowed to claim it. And so therefore we have great predictability on price increases. And so to that 25% increase that the transfer station operator, that was the end of a 10-year contract. We only had 2 bidders to run that facility, and one of them was the existing operator. We actually chose the newcomer, but in a sense, the fact that they bid 25% more than last year's contract shows that for the last several years, we've probably been way under market, you know. So I just want to point out that there's a strong sense of fiduciary responsibility to the rate that happens at SBWMA, in addition to this level of fiduciary care that I know we show our residents. And I do want to just make a quick pitch for some of those programs that SBWMA runs. It's actually a very small part of the overall line item on budget, but it includes public education, making sure the next generation understands the importance of recycling. And it also includes some very targeted lobbying up in Sacramento to try to reduce expenses for us. So for example, all the batteries, the lithium batteries that people throw away that then cause fires that raise all of our rates. We've worked with Sacramento to force the producers to take ownership of those batteries and not just put it on the backs of waste. We also worked hard to get plastic, and single-use plastics, because so little of that winds up getting recycled. So much of it goes to landfill. Again, that raises our expense, not to mention the environmental degradation. So I just wanted to put a pitch in. We try really hard to manage these costs. And then we did finally, actually, I suggested that we would dip into the agency's own rate stabilization reserve for this one jump this year, where we're going to see this big jump. So we are dipping in and cutting our agency's stabilization reserve by about 50% plus or minus to help smooth that jump for all the cities, all the member agencies. So I just wanted to add those additional comments. With that, let me stop talking and invite my colleagues to ask any questions you might have. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't need to bang the hammer. Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious about on the question of grandfathering the 20-gallon rate. What was the rationale for grandfathering it the last go around?
I wish I could speak to that, Councilman.
Come on.
I am not aware.
I can speak to that.
Oh, please.
So in two different ways. One, the reason that we had the reason that we set such a low price for the very smallest bin, this was back when we went from separated recycling to single stream. And so we were worried that everyone was going to throw stuff in the garbage. And so we wanted to encourage people to use that recycling. And so we created an incentive to have small, basically the black bin is landfill. And so we created an incentive to have a small bin, so you would actually then go to the trouble of making sure you sorted out your recycling and compost. So it was kind of a negative incentive. It is clearly, and I'm a beneficiary of this, I'm one of those 655 people. It absolutely should go away in my view. It's not relevant anymore. It's not fair. And, but anyway, that was why we priced it that way.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation and the details. I'm just curious about the education coming out of SBMWA in terms of how the ratepayers can actually help solve their own problem of costs. In other words, and some of that ties back to the grandfathered bins, but it's really not the collection side. That's kind of fixed. It's the spatial representation of the city. It's all on the, what happens to that waste when it ends up somewhere. So what are some of the things that are available or being contemplated in terms of that education process? So we can, take some of our own responsibility and try to drive down the costs or keep it low.
I'll speak to the first part, and I imagine the mayor may have some contributions to this as well. SBWMA doesn't really do education around rates themselves because the rates are all set and regulated and kind of approved at the local agency level. And you have some variety, diversity around rate structures within the SBWMA service area. They do, through both the authority themselves and then also through Recology, there are regional scale best practices that are extended to ratepayers around how to reduce their waste, how to recycle and compost correctly, and how to maximize their reuse and reduction prior to landfilling. So that'll all be standard across the service area. I think with respect to the city's kind of own rates, the Prop 218 notice provides some guidance around how folks can actually seek to minimize their waste. But more of that will be done at a regional scale and less around a direct, here's how you reduce your rate message, and more around here's how you participate correctly in these programs that are good for the environment and the state expects us all to do as municipalities. So there is, and that would primarily be through Recology, I believe, with some kind of more regional scale kind of advertising type campaigns done at the SBWMA level.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good answer. I can't see Councilmember Beach, so okay, great. Can we hear from Councilmember Beach?
Well, thanks for the thorough presentation. I appreciated the different tables in the staff report that not only show what the sort of bottom line for each of these years, but also the alternative table of what the proposed change, like that dollar figure, is month by month or year after year. And I think that's very helpful in transparency. So appreciate that. Back to the 20 gallon though. I suspect I've talked with a number of residents that just in principle like to have a smaller garbage bin, the black bin. So I just want to confirm that, and according to the chart, we'll still continue to offer it. It's just going to be that the 20 gallon folks have to pay their fair share of what it costs.
That's correct.
That's what I'm hearing.
Correct. And actually it would be offered again to the broader subscription opportunity throughout the residential rate base in the city. Whereas in 2012, the city restricted access to it and discontinued the ability for new subscribers to take advantage of that lower cost option. Now folks would be able to retake advantage of it again. That's a firm part of the recommendation or the proposal. Really, I think what's kind of at issue is that for those remaining 655, should they continue to play the kind of older legacy rate or be adjusted to the new proposed rate for all subscribers, those that would sign up new to this service or those that were previously subscribed to it. And I will add, both for the entire council's benefit, we did discuss with Recology what their kind of viewpoint is around this question. Their response was that the current grandfathered rate for the 20 gallon service is below the cost of service, and their recommendation would be to have it be effectively set the same, so that if anyone who's subscribed to a 20 gallon would pay the same rate and not have two different rate classifications.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, you said it was going to be set at 90% of the bundled pricing when you think about all the different bin service, or is it just of the 32 gallons?
It's just of the 32. The reason I brought up the service bundling aspect is folks might deduce, well, I'm getting a 20 gallon. Shouldn't that be 20 over 32 times the 32 gallon rate? And the answer is no, because really in these systems, it's the cost of providing the collection that's,
Picking up the bin.
it's picking up.
Doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And even then, I've been a 20 gallon subscriber, and you stand on that thing and you stomp as much waste into it as you can. So really in terms of the contents, you may not even really be dealing with all that much different weight. And your blue and your green containers are still the same size, regardless of your black container size.
Yeah.
And
It's outlet issues.
Mr. Mayor, just one other clarification. Because I remember for a while there was some concern with the inserts and people would have to come back for second collection. Do we feel like the 20 gallon these new rates kind of equilibrium will actually pay for the cost of service, or do they have additional cost associated because of their smaller size and because of some of those issues, or is that all figured into the rate study here?
I can answer that.
Are
Mayor.
they troublesome? Basically, are they troublesome, the 20 gallon?
The inserts still are a little troublesome according to Recology. I believe there's been advancement in that technology here, and it's still in use in other parts of the SBWMA service area. Other nearby communities are, Recology is still providing service in those 20-gallon containers. So, it's establishing the exact cost of service for a container like this is not a precise science, but certainly, we and Recology expressed, a level of comfort with the 90% of the 32-gallon being appropriate for this service offering.
Sounds good. I think it's great that we can still offer it in a reasonable way, people paying their fair share, and thank you for that detailed explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has
Councilmember.
been an issue of interest for many residents, so it's just wanted to really flesh that out so we can speak to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. Not seeing any other questions. I'm just going to open it up to the public. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on our waste rate issue? Is there anybody from home?
No, we don't have any emails, and I'd also just like to note for the people that are here that the people that are at home are able to see what's going on via the Zoom. We have our screens down, but they are able to see everything.
Okay, great.
Good to know.
Okay, then I'm going to close public hearing. Thank you again for that presentation. I will quickly say, if anyone's thinking of moving to the little one, the 20-gallon over 32, they're a pain in the neck. Just speaking from personal experience. So I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
But whatever. You get to do whatever you want to do.
Less.
They're
Fill it less, fill the big one less.
yes, fill the big one less is the better answer.
And stay disciplined on the other two.
Yes, right on. So unless there's additional comment, I'd welcome a motion to adopt the resolution for the hearing date.
And then we also need you to weigh in on the rate for the 20-gallon.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Why don't we dispose of that first?
I'll go ahead and make a motion
Mhm.
to adopt a resolution establishing a public hearing date of December 4th, 2023 regarding solid waste rates for calendar years 24 to 28.
Would you like to add to that a point of view on the raising the 20-gallon rate?
I think the 20-gallon rate should be consistent, so raise it.
So to 90% of the 32 gallons.
Yes.
And I'd like to second that, and I think it's about time the mayor starts paying his own way.
Bagging on all of that. Thank you, Councilman.
very much.
Excellent point.
Appreciate that. There's a motion by the vice mayor,
Second.
seconded
Oh.
snidely
And
by Councilmember Ortiz. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson.
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes. And so we will see everybody back here on December 4th. Thank you again for the work and the overview. And we do have your report in our, in our electronic files and stuff. So anybody who wants to refer to it can, and so can the public. That takes us to item 11B, a discussion of gas leaf blowers. And we'll start with a staff report from our Director of Sustainability. We're not even going to try to do PowerPoint.
I have it up.
Wait, I'm sorry, this is not in color.
Does,
You don't,
does Emily have one?
yes.
Okay.
It's on Zoom.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for having me tonight to talk about leaf blowers. This is a follow-up from our study session several months ago, and tonight I'm looking for more clarification and direction to bring a policy forward. So go along with me on your printout, but on existing ordinance, we have an existing ordinance that regulates when leaf blowers are allowed to be used by neighborhood and time of day. And it's moving on to the next slide because you're familiar with our leaf blower ordinance. And it's based on noise is the premise of how it was built. And leaf blowers are required to have a sticker indicating that they're no louder than 65 decibels. And we know that, heard from the study session, that sticker is problematic. It's hard to actually check for Public Works and our code enforcement officer to actually check each of those leaf blowers and get those stickers on it. So our proposal will be to remove that piece from the ordinance, but we'll get that in the end. So moving forward on the ARB rule, there is a new rule passed by the state that starting this January, the state is banning the sale of new gas leaf blowers. So starting this January, you won't be able to purchase a gas leaf blower in the state of California. You'll be able to still use your gas leaf blower, and I'm sure buy a used one, but stores won't be able to sell a new one. As part of helping landscape professionals with that new rule, the state did come out with an incentive program to offer landscapers. That money has already been spent, and now it's focusing on trucks and large diesel equipment. But I did speak with a couple of stores that use that rebate when it was available. And I understand it was very easy to use because it was at the shop. You could just go to the store and you buy your new leaf blower and you get the rebate right then and there. So when funding does open it, I think it'll be a helpful incentive for landscapers. I'm on slide, what are other cities doing? So a couple weeks ago, the city of Palo Alto actually held a leaf blower summit and invited cities to come and talk about leaf blowers. Just so you know, this is a reoccurring issue for all cities, even ones that already have a ban on leaf blowers. So looking at this table, Palo Alto has banned leaf blowers since 2005. So you're talking about almost 20 years, and their main issue is enforcement. And they get many calls with complaints about the use of gas leaf blowers in their city. And they hired a code compliance officer dedicated to leaf blowers. And that's who held the meeting. So cities, I tried to find about how many cities all in California. I think it's over 20, but quite a few centered here in the Bay Area have banned gas leaf blowers or in the process of doing it starting in January 2024. And I included cities mostly that are around the same size as Burlingame, but this isn't comprehensive. Oakland is in there too, Berkeley as well. And there's several cities that may not have a ban, they offer incentives. A few do both, but our neighboring cities in San Mateo and Redwood City offer incentives for both residents and commercial landscapers to purchase a new electric leaf blower. They have found that mostly residents use that incentive. And I know Redwood City used to require, they've stopped doing that because of the hassle that you turn in your gas leaf blower as part of the rebate. And San Anselmo currently still requires that, but it is a bit of a hassle for the cities because the gas in there is hazardous, and then it doesn't quite fit into electronic recycling. So they need to be prepared too if they want to offer that. So I did look a little bit into what do we mean when we talk about electric leaf blowers. So when I spoke with some of these shops, they told me that this model of the backpack leaf blower is the most popular for commercial to use as a leaf blower. And that sells for about $700 without the rebate. And I haven't talked to actual landscape professionals that use these electric leaf blowers, but assume that they would need a battery and a charger, and it could cost about $1,100, assuming these prices, but we know prices vary widely between different shops. Versus a resident could get a handheld leaf blower for about $150 to $400. For example, I heard, I think it's the city of, I think it was Redwood City that's offering $150, and they found that that covers most of the cost for many residents to purchase a leaf blower. And I did one comparable cost of a gas leaf blower. That also really ranges in prices, and I'm sure there's also a used market for it, but the one I included here to be the same manufacturer to try and compare oranges to oranges a little bit was $430. From just research more online, not from actual my own practice, but I believe that using a battery packed leaf blower lasts from 20 to 40 minutes per battery, depending power you use at the time and for how long. And I'm not sure, a question was asked in an email, I'm not sure how many spare batteries a landscaper would need to carry with them for a full day's work. Next slide. I did want to mention municipal electric equipment, and we have staff here that could probably better answer questions about that. But our staff, Parks and Rec, have been transitioning to electric landscape equipment when feasible. And they found that they see the benefits in using it, that it is quieter and healthier, but there are challenges in that it weighs more, it could be more expensive, the battery can be finicky. So there are limitations just as that industry continues to evolve and the technology improve. I'm on the challenges slide. So with anything, as we look at policy, some of the things that to consider is upfront costs are higher with battery, but there are some studies from advocates that show that in the long term, you save costs because you're not purchasing gas to fuel your leaf blower. We also want to consider equity. These are a lot of these landscape professionals. Some are big companies, some are just one people jobs that businesses that are trying to run, and it could be a burden on them to require them to purchase electric leaf blowers. The battery life could be limiting, and leaf blowers still make noise. I heard from the at the summit, they said for cities that have had these bans for a while, like Atherton and Menlo Park, or Menlo Park not as long, but Los Altos, that you could immediately hear what's gas versus electric. There is a huge difference, and the noise they're noisy, but the noise is quite reduced. But they still, spread dust. It doesn't take care of particulate matter from dust, just from emissions. The two, I think, biggest challenges that was mentioned at the summit was code enforcement. Most of these cities give a letter of violation to the resident to comply with it. And then, they get a call, and quite a few mentioned that it tends to be the same sort of small group of people that make complaints about leaf blowers, but it's hard to, when you arrive, for the landscaper to may not be there or may deny it. So they try and take pictures, and some of them use their local police for violations. So it could get a little complicated depending on the city and your approach. And outreach to landscapers, the biggest success other cities have had is to have Spanish-speaking staff, either code enforcement or just supportive staff, to come to the landscapers and offer the flyers or information on what's available out there. I included in the staff report a pamphlet that the city of Menlo Park put out that was in Spanish and just showed the options for electric landscape equipment available. And Palo Alto also, if I didn't mention it earlier, their ban on gas is just for residential, because I think there could be limiting for commercial projects and large project scale to use to use electric. So they just only limited, they were the only city I found that only limited for residential. So that's another consideration. So taking all that in mind and comments we've received in the study session, and since then, I was hoping to get some direction on policy that we would bring forth to the city council. So my recommendation, and first, is to keep the neighborhood program that we've had. We've had advocates that worked hard to achieve that, and it does do a good job of creating quieter days in neighborhoods in Burlingame. But I do recommend that we remove mention of the decibel sticker requirement on the actual leaf blowers. That just has been practically impossible to do and recommended strongly by our code enforcement officer to remove. And then for policy, I think we tonight, if we could discuss potentially offering our municipal operations. It's been mentioned in the past that they're quite limited by the hours. So if they use electric leaf blowers, that they don't need to comply with the neighborhood days of the week restrictions to give them a little bit more space to do their and time to do their work. Also, if we would like to move ahead with a full ban on gas leaf blowers, and when we would consider doing that, the state is starting January 1st, 2024, but I think it'd be helpful to landscapers to give some a phased in approach. Maybe some of the cities are doing it in July, or maybe just give them a full year to get used to the new ordinance. And then I would recommend offering a rebate to our landscapers, either residents or professionals. We do have funds potentially that was allocated for our Lawn Be Gone program that maybe we could take some and start it in this program and see where it would go from there to offer incentives to support our businesses who early adopters for electric leaf blowers. So thank you, and open it up for discussion.
Thank you for that. So I'm sure is there public comment? Yeah. So what I'd like to do is quickly see if there are any questions for Ms. Michael, and then go to public comment, and then we'll save our comments and guidance for after we've heard from everybody. So with respect to questions, Vice Olson.
Quick question on the rebates. Do they give a rebate? So you have to be a resident to get the rebate, and do you have to be a business that operates in the city or is registered in the city?
That would be up to us, but the others up to you, but the other cities do it that they need a business license in that city.
Okay.
That's the model I've seen, which we know, landscapers probably work in multiple cities. So that may be one of the reasons why rebates are more highly used by residents.
Mm-hmm.
And the rebate in other cities is a reimbursement. So you show proof of your receipt and then you get the rebate.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Curious, have you seen, particularly at the summit, any total cost of ownership, true total cost of ownership, both from a commercial or landscaper perspective and also a residential perspective? Because obviously those gas mowers are engines, they have moving parts, they fail more, they require more maintenance. It's not just the gas cost versus an electric motor, which has very few moving parts, would tend to last longer, but offset by the number of batteries you may need to have. So I'm just curious if you saw any studies on that, because that would certainly, in my mind, be very important on why a rebate program could work for many people. So.
It wasn't mentioned at the summit. I was much more focused from a code enforcement perspective and less on an actual operation of these leaf blowers, but that's something we could follow up with.
Great.
Thank you. Is Councilmember Beach asking a question? I just can't see.
She doesn't have her hand raised. No.
Okay, that's fine.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I wasn't going to raise my hand, but I did have a question that I posed, and I didn't give our wonderful sustainability coordinator a ton of time as I reached out this morning via email. But I have noticed, at least on my weather app, which is just, this is not official stuff, that Burlingame's air quality tends to be consistently lower than some other communities nearby in some of our neighboring communities. Now we've got the airport nearby, we've got highways, we've got trains, we've got a lot going on. But is there any data that shows how our air quality is that you've heard about that, or maybe we could look into that as we consider just policies in this arena? So I just wanted to follow up with that question via email.
Thank you.
A lot of time on that.
Yes, I didn't have a chance to collect it before this meeting, but I would reach out to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District and see if I could find some data maybe for the last year or so showing Burlingame in comparison to other cities and see if we could see any trends.
Thanks. It could be due to a lot of construction too, right? We have a lot going on here, but thank you for maybe looking into that.
Perfect. In that case, I'm going to open it up for public comment or questions. I'll start with members of the audience. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to join us? Former Mayor Terry Nagel.
All right.
We are honored.
Well, thank you. It's good to see everybody. And when I think back 11 years when we talked about this issue, this place was packed. So we've come a long way. I do think you would have more people if they could use Zoom though. I'll just say that. Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Well, maybe not. Okay. So anyway, you know the problems with leaf blowers. They're noisy. They cause respiratory problems, not only for residents, but for the people that operate them. And they definitely add to carbon emissions. So I just would like to say, because this is one of my hot button issues, that I would love to have these banned. I think it would be good to allow 6 months, like the cities of, I think it's Atherton and Menlo Park are doing, to have it take effect on July 1st of next year, because the state's going to start the enforcement on January 1st. And that would give them a little bit of time. And then we know that, as you yourself have said, Mr. Mayor, the people that have these will still keep using them unless we do that. So you can't just assume that everybody's going to chuck the old ones. I do think that rebates are a really good idea. I think it's fine for landscapers as well as homeowners, I'm convinced. And I got the data from the city of San Mateo, and they really did not have a ton of requests for that, but it is a good incentive. And finally, I really hope you'll keep the day of the week restriction, because people like me that work from home, it's like night and day. If you have only one day when you have to worry about your Zoom calls and, you know, the cacophony, it's much better than having it every day of the week. And I've also talked with some parents who have children who they don't let them go outside on the leaf blower days. They don't even let them go on the balcony because they have respiratory problems. So I think that's another consideration. And also I do feel that we could restrict the days also for municipal operations. I know other cities have done that. And there is new commercial equipment that would make it possible for cities to do leaf gathering, the leaf sweepers, they call them, on a quieter even level, because there wouldn't be any gas or electricity. So with that, I also want to remind people that we do have a lovely flyer on the website. So if your neighbor has a leaf blower going off, you don't have to go confront them. You don't have to call the police department. They don't have time for this. You can just download this flyer from the website, stick it on your neighbor's doorstep, and it tells the neighbor, this is your responsibility, not your gardener's. So please do keep in mind the enforcement that we have. Okay, thank you.
Just since you're with us this evening, let me ask your opinion. One of the questions would be, should the council decide to move forward with a ban? One of the questions will then be, should there be fines? And the question that I find interesting is whether the fine ought to apply to the homeowner who has hired the landscaper or not. I wonder what you think.
It is the homeowner's responsibility, I think, because, and a lot of people don't know that, but I know you get calls all the time. You ought to do something about my neighbor. It really is the homeowner's responsibility.
Thank you for that. Madam City Clerk, I see no other members of the public here. What about online?
An email from Doug Bojack. He says, I support introducing an ordinance to ban the use of gas leaf blowers as soon as possible. I believe the focus on day and time of use and decibel restrictions in the current ordinance can be softened or removed with this change, as electric blowers operate at a lower moderate sound level. Because they operate at that lower moderate sound level. If the council introduced an amendment to the ordinance where the ban takes effect at the beginning of next fiscal year, the city could immediately reallocate $5,000 from the Lawn Be Gone program, as noted in the staff report, to support a buy and retire rebate program for the rest of this fiscal year. and then address possible future funding in the next budget or through coordination with Peninsula Clean Energy. In fact, I believe Vice Mayor Colson mentioned PCE as a possible partner to offer a regional scale rebate, which would be appropriate for gardening services that operate across the county. Finally, regarding enforcement, let's not let the challenge of enforcement be the enemy of good policy. We know this is the right thing to do, and updating our ordinance to account for the ecological and public health damage that gas blowers cause is an important and necessary first step. And that's the only email we've received. I know you received some to the group council.
I was just going to add that we collectively received a number of comments both before the last session and since the last session. So they may not be part of this tonight's public record, but we have read them all and internalized that input as well, which I would say was probably 100% against gas leaf blowers in terms of public input. Okay, unless there are any other comments, I will close the public hearing. And council, there are a number of different elements to this question. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Ortiz.
I'll go down the list. The first thing was the day restrictions. I'm in favor of keeping those. Number 2 was the noise certification that I would go along with the recommendation to get rid of that. The municipal, I'm going to leave it up. That one I would leave alone. As far as the municipal operations, so they would not be subject to the day restrictions. And I would be in favor of banning the gas leaf blowers, and I like the timing that was recommended. And then I am in favor of offering a rebate, and I appreciate the vice mayor stole my question, because that's what I was wondering is residents and people who have a business license in town. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. So several different items. Any other comments? I mean, I think we all have comments. So why don't we just, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would keep the restrictions, day of week, fine with eliminating the certification process. I would want the Park and Rec Department to kind of explain the value of relaxing, how that might help in terms of schedule management and things like that. So a little bit, more deferred to their view. Definitely for the ban, I like the 6-month July timeframe for that transition. And I would like the rebate program, as long as there's some alignment with what is truly kind of a total cost of ownership. Because I think sometimes those rebate programs just help you with the initial buy, but you're not thinking about, and maybe that's why they're not participating as high as we would expect. But if they truly knew what that total cost was, I think they'd participate more significantly.
I do want to put to you, and I'll let Councilmember Ortiz also comment, but if we're going to go down this list, I do think a relevant question is, if we have a ban, then do we have fines, and should those fines apply to homeowners or just the landscapers? I think that's a relevant policy question. Let me ask Mr. Stevenson first.
I think it is the homeowner's responsibility.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Ortiz, you go. Okay.
Are you saying yes to fines or yes?
Yes to fining and applying that to the homeowner.
Yes to finding and applying that to the homeowner.
Yeah.
I'd even be okay if there was a fine collected that it goes into the rebate program.
Yeah.
Good point.
Again, I'm sure Councilmember Beach, would you like to weigh in at this point?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm largely aligned with colleagues who have spoken first. I mean, this is just our opportunity. We've been talking about resiliency with one shoreline tonight and the importance of trees and global warming, but this is a chance to slow the damage to the environment, right? Reducing our carbon footprint. So this is kind of, I think, really important that we take this step to ban gas-powered blowers. So I am aligned with everything that Councilmember Ortiz and Councilmember Stevenson had said. I am a little bit reluctant to make an except. First of all, I think we need to ban the gas-powered mowers, leaf blowers. at the municipal level. I'm reluctant to make exceptions for the day and time restrictions for the city. Because I think it's important to lead from the front on that. And I'm just not entirely convinced that we need to yet. Maybe I just need more data, but that's where I differ a little bit. Couple other comments. I am really want to lean in to some kind of a subsidy program, particularly for commercial gardeners, small business commercial gardeners, not necessarily major landscape companies, although I'm not opposed, but I would love for us to get really creative for how can we help those small business landscapers fund these purchases. I love what Menlo Park did with the discount at purchase. I wish there were some kind of a Burlingame business that where they could purchase them in Burlingame, and then there's this virtuous cycle of creating sales in Burlingame and arranging some kind of local purchase to help those small business gardeners. Maybe we can get creative there. But I'm more inclined to help the commercial small business gardeners than I am even the homeowners, the residents, because multi-unit residential families are not buying leaf blowers. It's really single family homeowners. And I'm not really, I'm less concerned about subsidizing those homeowners than I am the commercial gardeners to make this happen. I am concerned about the full cost and like the batteries that are going to be needed. And I wonder if there's a creative way we could address that with some kind of a battery swap program. And I haven't really thought it out, but I wonder if we could help fund some additional batteries where gardeners could swap them out at the parks or some location in neighborhoods. I wonder if there's some creativity there. I think education is going to be key. So I love the idea of a July 1st start date, 2024. Maybe we could hire some Spanish speaking student interns to work for the city of Burlingame next summer and do a lot of outreach and education and educate both gardeners and residents about and homeowners about this new policy. And I wonder if there could also be some kind of a creative way that we don't want to get into the weeds, but could we leverage our Parks and Recreation Foundation where community members could sponsor their gardener? Lots of these gardeners have multiple customers on a street. Maybe some streets could come together and help provide additional subsidy for their particular gardener and direct resources that way. I am reluctant to lose our money for the Lawn Be Gone program, but we did just implement a new city business tax. Maybe we could use some funds from there to seed a subsidy program, but I think subsidy is going to be key. So we have some carrots in addition to the stick coming hopefully on July 1st, 2024. Those are some ideas. Happy to brainstorm further, but thanks for this opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Beach. Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. So I think this program needs to be simple. I think the more simple it is, the easier it will be for people to participate. I personally banned gas blowers and all gas equipment in my own home 2 years ago. Worked with my own gardener. I think the complication is they're very much across city boundaries and borders. So, you know, and also, while I appreciate, you know, materials in Spanish, my gardeners are not Spanish. They are Caucasian. I mean, I don't know that we can assume every gardener is Spanish speaking. So I think having maybe materials in multiple languages is fine. Not, you know, 3 or 4, whatever we need to do. But and with regard to just all of the you know, I'm in agreement with what you all have said in terms of the city. I would sort of direct that over to Park and Rec, just to, you know, people who actually have to implement it in our city, if they can get away with doing it on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But we know that when there's a storm or there's a problem, they sometimes have to get this heavy equipment out. And I just want to give them the flexibility to do the work they need to do when they need to do it without having. I'm actually not for fines because I think I'm just not for fines. I just don't like having to find someone, then go collect the money and then try to find the money. And we only had 31 complaints last year that leaf blowers were running on incorrect days. I guess we could get complaints that people were using gas powered ones when they should have been using electric.
Right.
That maybe could be it. But I think if we just, I'd be willing to go implement in 6 months, put the program in place for 6 months. And if there's really a lot of programs, reevaluate and then fine people. I just hate to start with fines, right off the bat, especially someone who's just tried to buy a home or maybe squeezing every penny or, I just don't know. I'm not great with that. So I would be against fines and just include warning and information to go there. And then with regard to money, so we had a meeting with Peninsula Clean Energy today, and we have some surplus funds that we're looking at what to do. And one of the recommendations we're going to be making is to potentially give cities some allocation of funds that they can then do whatever they want with them. So that might not manifest for another 3 or 4 months, but there could be funds coming from PCE that we can then direct into whatever greenhouse gas reduction programs we want. So I'll just keep Sigal and city staff updated on that. But for now, just to get going, I'm okay to move 5,000 from Lawn Be Gone. And if, it's not a lot of money. If you do $100 a rebate, it's only going to get you 50 houses or 50 homeowners. They're going to be able to participate and then it's going to be done. So, it could be a start just to see if it's popular, but it's not gonna, to get 12,000 units of housing converted over to this it's just gonna not make a dent. And the reason I asked PCE why they hadn't, they put a lot of programs together that are for carbon reduction and, everything from EV charging and EV rebates. And they said it was just, they didn't get enough scale out of the program and people just were tending to do it without the rebates. So they just felt like there were other places to put the money in, as opposed to say a county-wide program for this. So that's just a little bit of my feedback.
Thank you. So I'll bring it to a close. I think I largely agree. I do think I will live with a 6-month ban. I would be willing to do a 3-month ban. I think these things are really bad for both the environment and for the people who use them, and certainly for the people who have to listen to them. And I reminded myself that this is a luxury. I mean, using a blower to blow leaves is a luxury. It's a luxury many people can afford, but there are plenty of non-motorized ways of moving leaves around a single family home or even a multifamily home. So I realized I had just grown tired of putting up with something that is a luxury. Now, are the people who perform these services, high paid individuals? No, they're not. I get it. But the homeowners can shoulder a bigger expense. And ultimately what has to happen is the landscapers have to charge the homeowners more money. We can talk about public subsidy. I'm happy to basically sign on to whatever rebate program we come up with. I do personally agree with Councilmember Beach that I'd rather subsidize the landscaper than the homeowner. Again, a homeowner in a Burlingame home is somebody who's got a lot of resources, my judgment. And so I don't feel as important. If we have precious rebate dollars, I'd rather direct landscapers. But fundamentally, the best way to get everybody to switch is not to let anyone cheat. And if too many people cheat, that's when the good guys say, well, why am I doing this? This is stupid. Everyone else is cheating. So that's why I do like the vice mayor's point of view that, 6-month program, 6-month warning periods, but then I would definitely have a fining regime because cheats are what make everyone else not want to play by the rules. And so otherwise I basically am in agreement, except that I'd do all of this sooner if I could. Finally, with respect to, I think probably in a sense, the hardest question for us is how to treat our own park and rec people. And I have a hard time with a double standard just because our guys, have more lawn to cover, but I understand it. I will say that there is a huge difference between 2-stroke engines and 4-stroke engines. So if we're going to allow gas leaf blowers, I'm not sure we should, but if we are, then we should insist that at least we're using 4-stroke engines.
The changing the restriction on the municipal operations is only if they're using electric, not gas.
Doing what now?
Only if they're using electric equipment, not gas equipment. Is that what you understood?
What do you mean?
So you're talking about municipal operation.
Right.
So if we take off all day of the week restrictions, it's only when they're using electric equipment, not gas equipment.
They can use electric all day.
You can use electric anytime.
Right. That's what they're asking for.
Yeah.
Right now, they can't.
So, okay. So in other words, staff isn't asking for gas powered. They just want
No, only electric.
relief from.
Only
Fine.
electric.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Thank you
Yeah.
for that clarification. In which case I support our staff having to use electric. And yes, I can understand bending the neighborhood rules because they have so much more land to cover. Thank you for that clarification, Madam City Manager. So with that, unless there's further commentary,
Can I just
please.
kind of recap what I think I heard?
Yes,
Because I want to make sure that the goal and it'll end up in the city attorney's office as well, capture it all. Day of the week restrictions, we have consensus to keep those in place.
maintain them
The noise sticker, we have consensus to get rid of that
because it doesn't work.
because it doesn't work. Everybody wants to ban gas powered leaf blowers, but we're going to have a 6-month runway for that transition period.
Which means
So
April, 6 months from today.
no,
Michael,
but it'll be July 1st.
3 months.
July 1st, 2024, because we're doing 6 months from when the state bans the sale. And
It'd be 6 months from today.
no, it's not.
Okay, I'll give.
That's not what I heard, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Municipal operations, I got 3, Vice Mayor Colson, Councilmember Ortiz, Mayor Brownrigg said you were okay to remove
Making-
that restriction because it is electric equipment, not gas equipment.
thank you.
I have,
Okay with that as well.
okay, now we got
For them to decide which.
Now we got Mr. Stevenson, okay. Fines, I have, 3 of you are okay with fining, but you want that 6-month runway for that as well. So fining, we would do warnings in that initial period. And then starting July 1st, we would start fining homeowners. And then, I had a couple of you are interested in rebates to landscapers. One of you was interested in rebates to homeowners. I think we're gonna maybe split the baby and do rebates for both.
Let's, Vice Mayor,
Well,
Colson, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so because these people go from jurisdiction to jurisdiction with they carry gas equipment and they carry, electric, and they have to get into a jurisdiction and figure out, and like on my street, across the street is Hillsborough. We could maybe have different, but anyway, because they have to carry both, I have encouraged homeowners in my neighborhood to buy them for them and leave them at their house. And so my landscaper said it was so much easier if people bought them and left them at their house for them. So that's one of the reasons I'd like to include homeowners. I don't see a lot of Burlingame people out there blowing their own lawns. I just don't. So I think anyone who's used, like, I have my own at my house, they come, they use them, they put them back, they put away. So I think, I don't think a lot of homeowners are gonna, unless you're either letting your landscaper do it, or you really are a homeowner who's doing your own landscaping, in which case I would be fine giving you a rebate. I think homeowners should be included.
So I think what might make sense is to follow the the Redwood City model. So it would be, they have commercial up to $300, but you have to have a business license from, well, I don't know if Redwood City requires it, but we would require, you have to have a business license from Burlingame. So if you don't have a business license, you can't come talk to us.
Can I actually pause you and just say, I think on this one, because we don't even know how much money we have to devote to it, maybe what we could do is let the Director of Sustainability come up with a proposal for rebates, and then we could discuss that.
Think we'd want to, well, maybe I guess we don't need to put it in the ordinance, the rebates. We
No.
can just do that as part of the implementing. Okay, we can do that. But we will do rebates for both landscapers and homeowners. I think we have enough consensus to do that. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I'm sorry, Councilmember Beach, I had you hidden, or do I have consensus from you on most of that?
I am for fines. I like the idea of fines being invested in a rebate program. I am supportive of rebates for gardeners. I'm not concerned if they use rebated equipment in Burlingame or elsewhere. It's getting the particulates and the carbon emissions out of Burlingame, even if they use them in other cities. Thanks.
I think, again, there's a question about how far the money might go, and therefore, should you do both homeowners and commercial? But what I would
Yeah.
suggest on that particular program is we let the director of sustainability figure out about how much money it might be, and maybe give us a couple of options, and then figure out the best rebate program at the next and final session.
And we'll have more.
Because it's not part of the ordinance.
Right. And so we talked about using the 5,000 from the lawn be gone, but honestly,
That's disappear.
it doesn't really matter sort of where the money comes from. We can, if we wanted to do a program for like 10 grand, we could figure that out. I wouldn't, go all crazy with it, at least to start out, and then we could add money later on, but we can figure out the funding source. That's not.
And we'll know in the next few months, by November, what the recommendation for PCE surplus funds is going to be and
Right.
how much you guys we might be getting. So that we can figure that out at that point.
So we'll make that the last piece of it, is what the rebate looks like. And we'll try to get the ordinance done sooner.
And materials in multiple languages,
We would definitely do materials in multiple languages, because there are, we have lots of languages spoken here. So I would imagine lots of landscapers speak
Good.
those languages.
Great. That was productive. Are there any other final comments? I think we've given.
Mr.
the
Mayor,
director
just
a lot of guidance.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, just one, I don't know if we can, depends how much money we have available, but I would rather see, I would be inclined to try to see larger rebates available to the tune of San Mateo, even though that's substantial, but to actually help people pay for these things. Or if there's other creative programs we can come up with where the community helps us fund some additional rebates. This is something a lot of people in the community want to see happen, and it might be an opportunity for people to invest in the public health. So thanks.
Right, additional guidance for the director to weigh. Thank you. I think that takes us to the end of that item. In which case then we are actually at the end of our meeting. We have council committee activities and reports. Are there any reports that colleagues would like to make to one another? I see.
The Cora, I don't know where you want to put that under new business. Future.
Yeah. We can't talk about it right now.
No, and we can't get in on the guideline, but could we put it as a future agenda item?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'll bring it up then.
so there were, so that, I'll just say, put it this way, the vice mayor and I would like to discuss participating in a program that Cora is doing that helps create literature for, perhaps you can describe it better than I can.
Do you want to put it under future agenda?
Yeah,
items?
future agenda items,
Are we
just
there?
quickly. Yeah, just explain it.
So Cora has a new program they're rolling out throughout the county. They do all the materials and the work. It's $10,000 for a city of our size. And what they do is they work with all the businesses, share materials like for their bathrooms and in their, where their employees work and wherever people might go. And you work usually in conjunction with the chamber. The reason they're rolling it out this month is because it's Domestic Violence Recognition Month. So it's really what it does is it helps people identify what domestic violence is like and gives resources for people who might be suffering. Children, it could be children who feel like, maybe teenagers, kids, adults, women, men, anyone who might be subject to domestic violence. It gives them the resources that they can do to work through Cora.
And I think we'd all support the program, and the reason that it has to be agendized is because it has a cost item.
Right. So if you could just send me information about it.
Will do.
Yeah, I'll send you, I think I might have even copied you on it. Okay, maybe not.
Are there any other future agenda items that people would like to suggest? I'm going to alert my colleagues that I put one on and, you know, I hear the jokes already, so I get it. But I want to introduce the conversation around term limits before I step off as mayor. And I say that because the town has a long history of not having term limits. And it's in light of the recent experience with district elections where I think it merits a conversation. That conversation may be leave it all alone. It may be thinking about whether term limits going forward, it's always on a go forward basis, makes sense. So that's going to be in November that we'll talk about that. I just wanted to give people a heads up that we'll have that conversation. We'll see where it goes. So that's it for new items. Is there any buddy that we need to close in memory of? Seeing none, I'm going to note that we failed to close last session in honor of Senator Feinstein, a real lioness in our state's politics. But I'm actually not going to close with a moment of silence. We all remember Senator Feinstein's contributions, Mayor Feinstein. I want to close on a happy note. And that was a couple of days ago, a friend of many of ours, if not all of ours, John Ward, got married to May Lum. They've been together a very long time and they decided to tie the knot. And I thought it was appropriate to close tonight in honor of John and May and wish them many, many, many more happy years together.
Very nice.
And with that, being adjourned.
Okay. Get through.
You rushing out, Mike?
I'm going to say hello to my son who's out there with,
Oh, that's why you.
I don't know when he showed up,
That's fun.
but no, I'm not.
Wait.
Ricardo,
Michael,
Yeah.
what?
That's
Your son?
Yeah.
No way.
It's my oldest girlfriend.
God, I haven't seen him probably in 15 years.
Megan, I'll send it on. I sent it to Lisa. I think I sent it.
Megan, I'm
I think
gonna
I
take the
sent, I
pencil
think
here.
Cora sent it.
Thank you.
Okay, you copied me on it or me.